Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing guest is an MBE like me. I'm now getting other MBEs on the channel. How good's that? This guest has a great story to tell, and it's going to be really, really interesting this episode. So, first of all, let me welcome our amazing guest, Miah, MBE.
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Nick.
You're welcome. Um, First question really is, who are you? What do you get an MBE for? What's your story? Why do I want to talk to you today?
For 25 years or so, Nick, I've been at the forefront of race relations, race equality, community cohesion work. I spent a chunk of my time advising government, advising ministers. I sat on government task forces. I am from Oldham. I am from a working class town in Oldham. And what I found I brought into those spaces is real world experience that was often lacked by the academics and the policy officers and the politicians who I was surrounded with. So that's my expertise, 25 years at the forefront of this sort of work. I received my MBE by the time I was 30 years old, Nick, and now I'm 50 in a couple of weeks. So that's me.
And you received your MBE for that work.
For services to the community, helping keep our country safe from extremism, Nick, is what I did. And extremists and the jihadists and all that sort of stuff. As far back as 1997, Nick, 4 years before 9/11, I was raising alarms about the way in which the Islamists were moving into our towns and cities. That's 4 years before 9/11 and 7 or 8 years before 7/7 took place.
And did anybody pay any attention to that?
Well, the Home Secretary eventually did, David Blunkett. He took me in my mid-20s, and I was advising him and his government.
Right. And I believe that you're actually a Muslim yourself.
I am a Muslim. I am indeed a Muslim. Many of my Muslim peers dislike that I'm a Muslim because it stops or it makes it more difficult for them to criticize, or use Islamophobia as an excuse. As recently as 10 days ago, Nick, I was arrested by Greater Manchester Police for apparently racially aggravated crimes against Muslims, this me being a Muslim. So yeah, they struggle with me being a Muslim, but I am a Muslim. I'm a practicing Muslim. I fast, I go to the mosque, I do all those things, Nick.
Well, it's nice to know that this crazy world we live in at the moment is persecuting brown Muslims like you, as well as persecuting white Christians and persecuting anybody who has the wrong opinion. So at least we've got some equity there now, that these idiots are persecuting anybody, regardless of sexuality, skin color, religion, if you have the wrong opinion.
Oh, they've just weaponized it, Nick, is what they've done. They have weaponized it. So it doesn't matter what color I am or what color you are, what religion you might be or I might be. It's our political perspective and the way we look on the world that is the issue to them.
Yeah, and these words mean nothing now. Racism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, they mean absolutely nothing because they've been used so many times in the wrong context that people read it now and go, no.
It's the crying of wolf, Nick. And when these crimes against these communities do take place, and the homophobia in my community is rife, it becomes very difficult, because you've used it. You've overused it. You've used it in the wrong way, and then actually you discredit and you disempower those people who are genuine victims. And I think if there's a travesty in any of this, that's one of those travesties, is that genuine crimes are now, we look the other way, you'd look the other way and think, no, that's not the case. And that's because it's been weaponized and exploited for the wrong reasons by the wrong people.
You use a great phrase there, crying wolf, and I'm going to start using that myself because that's a great description of what people are doing with these words, just crying wolf.
Absolutely. I agree with you. But in terms of my credentials, Nick, 25 years, 30 years at the forefront of this industry, mate. And I call it an industry because that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned a minute ago you're from Oldham. You live in Oldham and you want to run as an Oldham MP at the next general election.
Oh, I will be, Nick. Yeah. I mean, I was raised in Oldham. I moved to Oldham when I was a baby. My parents, the history of my family is very simple. I'm the product of a second marriage. My father was sent to go and fight in the Second World War. So his father sent the eldest son, as was the tradition, to serve the empire. He walked from Sylhet to Calcutta, got on a boat, served in the navy, and the boat kicked him off in Liverpool and told him to make his own way home in 1944, 1945. So from then, long story short, I was born in Bradford many years later, and my mum and dad wanted a better life for themselves. Instead of moving to Manchester or moving to Leeds, they moved to Oldham. So from about 3 or 4 months old up to my 40s, I lived in Oldham. For a stint, I lived in Manchester, Nick, not far from the train station because of the work I did, and also because I was developing Manchester's counterterrorism strategy. So that's a stint in Manchester. And at the moment, I live in a small place called Mosley, which has a train station, which is about a 5-minute walk into Oldham. My critics like to claim I'm not from Oldham, but anyone who is from Oldham will happily tell you that I am from that town, and that town is my home.
Good. Tell me about Oldham, because obviously I know Oldham. I've been to Oldham many times. I've had friends who live in Oldham. But this last 10 years, I would say the reputation of Oldham has taken quite a dive. Every time you read about Oldham now, it's about child sexual exploitation. It's about a corrupt council. It was not that long ago where the leader of the council was connected to gangsters. She had a car fire bombed. It's as if it's a failing state. Is that too hyperbolic? Am I
No,
just
no, no,
reading
no,
the bad
Nick.
press?
No, no, no. I think, let's be very clear here. Now, last week, Amanda Chadderton was defeated at the ballot box. She's the third Labour Party leader that has been defeated in succession. So it's the third party leader in just over 2 years. What Oldham has done, and it should be a warning to every town and city across our country, Nick, is Oldham has amplified everything that is wrong about identity politics and the way in which local government engages with communities, and the way in which, in particular, the Labour Party has weaponized and divided one community against another. And that is essentially what Oldham is. It's gangster politics played out in control of the council. So no longer do these gangsters control territories such as Glodwick or Westwood or Werneth. These are some areas, but they have infiltrated the political landscape of the town. And to give you an example, Nick, and you talked about the firebombing of the car and stuff like that, the new leader, the Labour Party selected her yesterday, is Arooj Shah. We defeated her last year as the council leader in Chadderton South. She was put in to St. Mary's, which is a Pakistani stronghold ward, to make sure she got elected. And within hours, she became the new leader of the council. This woman is infamous for her relationship. She refers to him as a childhood friend, and I've not pried any further, and people's private lives aren't my business, really, Nick. So I intentionally have not pried any further. But she has a clear connection with Dale Cregan. That's the cop killer, Dale Cregan. His getaway driver were this man called Irish Imi, and he has been hanging off her arm throughout the election campaign, to the point where on Friday, Nick, this Friday, the count in Oldham wasn't on the Thursday night. It was on the Friday. For the third year in succession, he was at the count alongside his friend, Arooj Shah. This is a mobster. This is a convicted heroin dealer. And to make matters worse, Nick, he was meant to be in court in the morning because he'd breached a restraining order against me. And when I spoke to the CPS in the morning for his trial, he hadn't turned up. So he was found guilty. So I'm presuming at some point he turned up and went back to the count. I mean, this town, my town, has been infiltrated by mobsters. The political leadership of my town, the way in which decisions are made in this town, is now, you can't tell the politicians from the mobsters. It's unbelievable. It's staggering. And this isn't me hyperboling or you hyperboling. These are the facts.
When we use the word gangster sometimes, especially with politicians, we're exaggerating, we are, being hyperbolic. But in this case, we're actually talking about old-fashioned criminality, criminals, criminal families, involved in the drug trade, involved in racketeering, involved in violence. We really are talking about proper gangsters here.
We're talking about convicted heroin dealers. We're talking about, I mean, a former mayor, his brother was a convicted cannabis, cannabis supplier or something. Arud Shah's brother is a convicted money launderer. One of the other lads there kidnapped a young man off the street, tortured him, videoed the torture. The police turned up and found blood splattered all over the walls. This is what we're talking about, and these people are directly involved in the political leadership and the political landscape of our town. There's no ambiguity here, Nick. This is the truth.
Let me put this question to you. Is this the leaders of Oldham Council using the gangsters as connections to get elected, to run their area? Or is this the gangsters have realised there's more money and more influence to be made by getting in the council?
Both. I think both, isn't it? I mean, the gangsters control votes. When I refer to them as cartels, I use the word cartels, yeah, is what I use. But the gangsters control votes. There's massive postal vote fraud in my town, like there is in many towns and cities across the country with demographics such as mine, high Muslim, high Pakistani, high Bangladeshi, where families control votes, and groups and clans control votes, high postal votes. And the postal vote system allows for that level of influence, which wouldn't be possible if you or I went into a polling station and when no one looking at you, and I put across what I wanted to, in secret. Yeah. And that's been taken away by postal votes and the way in which postal votes are exploited.
Well, hopefully that's the next thing the government will look at now they've looked at ID to vote. Now, Oldham is also synonymous with child sex exploitation. And one of the worst things I've read in a long time, I think it was last year, Amanda Chadderton, the former leader of Oldham Council, didn't want a public inquiry into that, but then also said, being raped as a child doesn't ruin your life. That they weren't her exact words. I can't remember her exact words, but that's roughly what she said. Being raped as a child doesn't ruin your life. It was absolute. I can't believe she got away with it. I can't believe she was at national press and forced to resign and kicked out the Labour Party.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, Nick, she didn't get away with it. We ran a crowd-funded campaign where we distributed leaflets in Royton South, which is the ward where she was up for re-election, and she lost. She's now no longer a councillor. So we can only win. And this is what I've been spearheading for the last 4 or 5 years now, Nick. We can only win by being brave enough to speak about these issues and deal with the allegations that we're racist and far right extremists. A MP, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon, named me a racist and a far right activist in Parliament using parliamentary privilege after Andy Burnham's assurance review revealed that children in my town were groomed and gang raped. That's white working class girls were groomed and gang raped by Pakistani men. Now, as in the context of Amanda Chadderton, she is just the latest in a series of Labour Party leaders in this town. They think they behave this way, Nick, because this is the way their predecessors have behaved and it's accepted. This is the norm for them. To cover up gang rape of children is the norm for them. The first of the politicians to do it was Jim McMahon when he was leader of the council. In a series of leaked emails, it confirmed, with the BBC, by the way, in collusion with the BBC, they agreed to cover up what was taking place for 2 reasons. One was community relations, and it's their words, community relations, not mine. And the second reason was because the BNP was standing in the town. Now, I'm a Democrat, Nick. Fundamentally, like you, I'm a Democrat. I believe in democracy. And I am opposed to the BNP, but they have every right to stand. And it is not, for a council or the police to cover up the grooming and gang rape of children because the far right might exploit it. Actually, what they should have done was dealt with it and had it dealt with in the mainstream. And if they dealt with it in the mainstream like they should have done, then the far right could never have exploited it and never would have exploited it, Nick. Now, it started with
it never would exist. Yes.
It never would exist. I have been leading this campaign for 4 or 5 years in my town. I'm a brown man. I'm Bangladeshi heritage. I am a Muslim, like I've shared with you. And the reason the far right have had zero traction in Oldham is because it's been led by people like me who have said this is wrong, right is right, and wrong is wrong, Nick. And the gang raping of little girls is wrong, and it can never be legitimized, it can never be excused.
No, absolutely appalling. Now, as you know, I'm running for Mayor of Greater Manchester, and if I win next year, we're going to reopen all the CSC cases. Not, and I'm really talking about the people in charge. I'm going to be looking at every senior GMP officer and any senior GMP officer who neglected his or her duty is going to be fired. And I can't fire councillors as the MP, as the mayor, but will be highlighting and publicly shaming every public official who didn't do their job, who looked the other way or was incompetent or maybe colluded. They're all going to be publicly shamed. So then at the next election, people can make a decision who they're going to vote for, because all this has been brushed under the carpet far too much.
Let me give you an example, Nick. A very, very recent example. I don't have to go back 10 years or 20 years. When Andy Burnham's assurance review, and by the way, it provided no assurance whatsoever, it was a sham of a review. But when Andy Burnham's assurance review was confirmed what had taken place, which was children were failed, it emerged that the way in which the terms of reference was set up was that the council who was being investigated decided what evidence could be seen. And it was the council responsible for identifying the victims and contacting the victims. The assurance review failed to speak to a single victim except one, and that was at the interjection of Maggie Oliver, who bypassed the council and went straight to the investigators and said, why are you not speaking to the victims? Now, the reason why this victim was prevented was a senior council officer, and it's in the assurance review. No one can sue me for this, Nick. It's actually in the details, but they hide it. They focus on the executive summary, which is rewritten and spun, but the details show all of it. In the context of the details is the chief executive of Children's Services claiming that the victim's mental health would suffer if she was interviewed. So he'd blocked it. He essentially blocked victims from testifying.
Those victims should have been asked, do you want to partake? If they say no because of my mental health, that's a valid reason for that individual, but not to have someone else impose what they think.
And let me take it somewhere further, Nick, for even beyond that. One of the victims in that report is referred to as Child A. Okay, Child A was contacted to say that she had been made reference to in the report, and she was appalled. They'd already written up what they were going to say about her. Child A found me. I had no contact with Child A. Got in touch with contact with me via Facebook or Messenger and asked me to share her story. I recorded her story on a podcast and just put it out there. And do you know what they did to Child A? They went and visited her and threatened her with arrest.
Under what law with the threatening?
Who knows? But this is a victim. This is a victim. Yeah, this is a victim of CSE visited by the police, and not only threatened with arrest, they also claimed that she was jeopardizing any future investigation into her perpetrators and other victims as well. So they put that on her as well. These are young women who've gone through hell, Nick. I disagree with Amanda Chadderton so much. She said you can't say it didn't destroy lives. Of course it destroyed lives. Of course it destroyed lives. And for anyone to even suggest otherwise is outrageous.
Absolutely outrageous. Now, you've just mentioned the police there. So that brings me on to this point. Are the police corrupt? Are the police being influenced by the politics in Oldham for community relations? What is happening with the police? Because I was based for a decade in police stations. I used to train police officers when I worked for Manchester Council. I was never a police officer, I was a council manager. So I've done a lot of work with the police. And it shocks me when I hear these stories from across the country. These aren't the officers I knew. These aren't the officers I used to work with and train, who were dedicated. So what's gone wrong in Oldham with the police? Is it too much political interference? Are they afraid of riots? What's going on?
I think the first thing to say, Nick, is like you, I've spent 20 years or more working with very decent police officers. So I think that's important. I am a believer in law and order. I'm 50 in a couple of weeks. I don't have a criminal record or anything like that, Nick. In the scheme of things, I'm a model citizen. Yeah. I don't even have points on my driving license. I was arrested 2 weeks ago. It was the latest in a sequence of arrests. They've been arresting me on off now for the last 3 years. Cases have collapsed at trial, Nick. Cases haven't reached trial. And my latest arrest, I think, sums up what's taking place. The police have been politically infiltrated. They are now attempting to interfere in elections. That's what's taking place, Nick, and that's what took place 2 weeks ago. I was arrested at 6:40 because of, in the morning, 4 police officers at my door because of an anonymous complaint, Nick. An anonymous complaint that I had apparently said some nasty things about Muslims. Bear in mind, I'm a Muslim. Yeah. I'd said some nasty things about Muslims. And what I'd objected to is a number of Muslims had made death threats to me and my friends, my family members, my extended, network of friends, because we objected to the mosque, the main mosque, praying for the Labour Party. The mosque should not be involved in politics. No mosque should be involved in politics, let alone promoting a political party on the day postal votes arrive. And that's what I objected to. And what some of the congregation did was incite violence against me. I will have serious damage done to me, Nick. So I reported that to the police. The police refused to intervene. So I put a video out, just calling these people out, saying, this is a liberal Western democracy. You can't do these things here. You can't do. And the police came and arrested me, Nick, off an anonymous complaint. The 2 police officers who arrested me in my flat at 6:40 in the morning were keen to point out that they were only following instructions. They wouldn't say who had authorized my arrest. The 2 police officers who took me to Central Station in the van, decent lads, were keen to point out that they were only the drivers and they weren't responsible for my arrest. So this thing about, decent police officers, they know what's going on, Nick. The 2 police officers who eventually interviewed me claimed they weren't interviewing me and the interviewing officer was someone else. They wouldn't say who the interviewing officer was. So I'm like, well, I'm in an interview room with my solicitor next to me and you are asking me questions. You've just pressed record on something in the world I come from. That's an interview. You're conducting the interview. They were keen to point out that they weren't the interviewing officers. And 14 hours later, they let me go, Nick. And it was very clear from my solicitor's exchange with them and my exchange with them that they had been ordered to disrupt me campaigning and try and silence me. And the only reason anyone would want to silence me is because of my campaign to try my best to galvanize my community towards 2 things. One is holding these politicians to account and exposing the corruption in my town. But 2, most importantly, is campaigning for a public inquiry into the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of my town's children. And I am being persecuted, Nick, by the police because of those 2 things. Because as the police have found out, as they've searched my house, I don't smoke, I don't drink, never mind do drugs or anything like that, Nick. I have a very young daughter who I share my home with. And as they've gone through my internet stuff, all they found is, political books and things like that on them, Nick. So I'm not a criminal. They've tried to criminalize me. And you made reference, and I'd like to bring this up, Nick. You made reference to the firebombing of the council leader's car. 2 years now, nearly, Nick. I wrote an article, Nick, objecting to the attack on Jewish people in my town. As a Muslim, I wrote an article objecting to how the Palestinian-Israeli conflict had been politicized, weaponized, and it was exploiting prejudices from, people from within my own Muslim community. And I found that as an equality and human rights campaign, I found that really difficult, Nick. So I wrote an article on that. And I published that article at 11 o'clock on a certain day. The night before, Nick, Arooj Shah's car had been blown up. The MP, Jim McMahon, got in touch with the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail contacted me and attempted to claim that I had incited the blowing up of the council leader's car. I showed them how the date stamp of my publication of my article and said, how is an article published 12 hours later responsible for the firebombing of someone's car? And secondly, if you read my article and you understand anything about me, I'm not a gangster. I believe in the power of democracy and have demonstrated time and time and time again. We hold them accountable through legal means, and ultimately that's the ballot box, and that's what we do. Now, what's took place with that firebombing of the car is, I grew up in this town, Nick, and one of the old contacts I have sent me off a burner phone, Nick. I found it really bizarre. Sent me off a burner phone on CCTV footage of the car being blown up with a message saying, making reference to something we did in third year in science class. So I knew, it'd come from a trusted source. With Raja, you will need this to protect yourself. They tried to frame me for the firebombing of her car, Nick, and the CCTV footage shows that her car was not parked outside her house like she claimed. It was parked around the corner on a different street. The doors had been left unlocked, and the window was smashed after the doors had been opened. And the police 2 years later will not issue a statement of any kind. And this woman is now the leader of the council. Sorry, Nick, if I'm getting emotional, it's because they tried to put me in prison. They tried to put me in prison.
It's I keep using the word shocking, but it is, this is Great Britain. We shouldn't have areas of the country being run like this as a gangster state, fitting people up, the police knocking on your door, being arrested, no charges. And it's not how we should be running our society and our community. And if elected mayor, I'm going to be looking at political influence in the police, and we will be going after elected politicians who are criminals. And the reason why Andy Burnham hasn't done that is because he needs all these politicians, because he's a Labour man. I'm not.
He needs the politicians for the votes.
Exactly, and I'm not. I'm an independent. I don't want to be elected again as mayor. I'm only running one term, so I don't care if I burn bridges. I really don't care. I just want to clean up Greater Manchester, and I want to fix Greater Manchester Police, because they used to be a great organisation, and we need them to run a decent society. You need a decent police force.
I agree with you, and my friends who are police officers can't look me in the face. They're embarrassed. They're embarrassed when their children have conversations with me, because their children know I've been arrested, and their children know me as a guy who, who sits and eats pizza with them and, plays ball, takes them to the cinema and stuff like that. Nick, it's outrageous, and it's why I'm running for MP for Oldham West and Right. Exactly the same. I will only have one term, Nick. I'm not even interested in the salary. I'll donate the bloody salary to charity. I need to help take back my town from these corrupt officials, from the likes of Jim McMahon, who rely on this network of Muslim bloc voting cartels to stay in power. Our democracy is at risk here, Nick. Our way of life, everything we value, everything we hold dear is at risk here. And I'm not exaggerating, because that's what we're fighting for here. We're fighting to preserve our way of life.
I think that's a great place to end. I don't think we could end it better than that. I wish you all the luck next year, and I'll try to help you next year at the general election. And it takes people like me and you to have to stand up to do something, because we're patriots and we love this country.
Absolutely, Nick. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yes.
Thank you for being a guest. I'll chat to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Did you like that video? I think you did. Hit the bell, give it a big thumbs up, comment, and don't forget, I'm standing for election in Oldham, East and Saddleworth. So please share this video, speak to your family and friends if you live in Greater Manchester, and if you live in Oldham, East and Saddleworth, make sure you vote for me. Catch you soon.